Do you remember sitting in class and the teacher asked a request or a question to the class? Then there was the dreaded waiting and anticipation to see who the teacher was going to call on. Some teachers were generous and only called on those that had their hands raised. Other teachers disregarded any hand raising and called on anyone they wanted to hear a response from. You all know the feeling. For some, you had the answers and delighted in raising your hand because you wanted to show your hard work and study. Others, you hoped not to be called on because you either did not have the answer or you were just hoping to passively sit through class and not actively engage. No matter who you were, there are reasons teachers choose to call on who they want to call on. They want the entire class to engage in what is going on. They want to recognize your ability to speak wisdom to the class. They want to challenge you to grow as a person and learner. This type of calling on students is not far removed on how God calls out his people. After Noah stepped off the boat after the flood, it did not take long for him to step right back into sinfulness. Still, God took further measures of redemption. He calls on Abraham to carry out his will. Abraham was not someone who had his hand raised in class and was hoping that God called on him. Instead, Abraham is simply a participant of creation that God decided would carry the seed of the road that would lead back to full redemption. What is important in any relationship is that when someone calls on you, you have a choice to respond. In any healthy and obedient relationship, the one called on does respond. In the case of a relationship of God and humankind, God always does the calling and humans are expected to respond. But we know that is not always the case. Otherwise, we would not be considered sinners or people in need of a savior or needing redemption. Before Abraham and God's calling of Abraham, there was a society of people that sought not to respond to God's call and instead only desired to answer to themselves. Many of you probably know the story of Babel. These people wanted to unite and build a tower among the gods, not to be close to God, but to replace God. This type of response was not an obedient response on the people of God called on by God. So God dispersed these people. When God called on Abraham, he was looking for obedience and faithfulness, not an equal. He was looking for someone to bear his image, not replace it. In Babel, they sought to build God out of the world. God instead wanted to build a nation that will represent him. The story of Babel pinpoints the focus of man's problem. When they built a tower and centralized their thinking, they were seeking to grow man in man's image. As God scattered the people and confused them, it was to readjust their focus, not on themselves and what they were capable of, but he wanted them to rely on their Creator and seek relationship with him. The very things that Babel coveted was given to Abraham because of the contrast of relationship. It is from that obedient relationship with God that God used to plant a seed that would develop into a nation that was called to be an example, a representation of who he, Yahweh, is. He would take this nation and put them at the crossroads of the world so that no one would miss out on experiencing and knowing who he is, and he sought to do it through his people. And from these people, a king would one day be born and rise up to his throne and perfectly bear this image and live out exactly as God called him to be.